Let's go ahead, welcome. Uh, Because we moved the field trip sequence, I had to jockey around and get some kind of classroom stuff going, so this is not finessed as much as I sometimes like, but we're okay. Again, the field trip, if you've gotten the email, we're going to do the Blackwater and Oakley Street trip this Friday. I'm going to go down to Oakley Street tomorrow anyway, and I'll have a look at it and see how much it's worthwhile going over there, but it usually is something. And the ducks should be starting to rebuild. I heard the other day there were just a couple of species there, but anything can happen. The shop tank is thawing out a little bit, as are we. And then we'll do the Fallstead property the following Friday. This Friday, the trip therefore it's booked as an all-day trip, but it really won't be. But I do suggest that you bring lunch, and we'll probably go to the visitor center at the end of touring Wildlife Drive down there and have some lunch and maybe chat about what we've seen or what we didn't see. And then I may not go on further after that. So 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock at the latest, I think would be on the road home. It's still going to be kind of interesting. As I drove out my drive this morning on Schwanniger Road, there were about a half dozen horned larks right beside the drive. And we often go after those. It's a fairly common bird. It's not just a winter species, but it's easier to see in the winter because the bird tends to like to go where there are bare patches if there's snow on the ground. So you often get good looks at them right along the roadside if there's been a little bit of snow, or now as the snow is melting. So we're going to go down Egypt Road from Cambridge to get to Blackwater. And a lot of birders like to go along that road because it gives you nice vistas for the possibility of seeing some hawks. And then in the bare patches, horned larks and pipits and maybe some meadowlarks. So, it won't all be ducky. And we'll see what else we can do. I don't know what Blackwater is going to be like. I'm sure there'll be some open water. And we'll just take it as it can. I'm not going to scout that particular one because the drive is pretty well
Is there
taken care of.
carpool option? I didn't see.
Yes, there is. And what I could, I'll let you arrange it yourself, but I thought we'd all meet at the Sailwinds Park parking lot, and you can leave cars there as well. So even if it's only for Oakley Street parking is kind of hard to get. It's a private lane. There's a lot of other cars parked along it. That would be good enough, and if you want to continue on, I can take, Daisy Mae's not going to go because she can't get out of the car at Blackwater, so I can take 2 or 3 people easily. Yeah, great, so we can do that.
Is anybody coming from St. Michael's to meet at Acme? That doesn't work out? Well, let's forget about it.
But the cars are safe there at Sailwinds. It's a public park, and when we do the YMOS, we'll often leave cars there. It's no problem at all. So there are those options. And if anybody really does need a ride, let me know. I certainly can help out best I can. So that's coming up this Friday. Looks like it's going to be a lovely day. I got up to 50 today, at least something like that. There's another good reason for doing something on Friday. It's the first day of a 4-day weekend. And I don't mean President's Day. It's the weekend of the Great Backyard Bird Count, which is a national effort by Audubon and in conjunction with places like Cornell and elsewhere to count the birds that you can see in your backyard or anywhere. And any eBird checklist that's submitted on Friday through Monday contributes to the bird count. So we'll be doing it on Friday, and if you have your own checklist, or if you want to do your yard or something else on the weekends, if you're into eBird, that all counts. If you really want to get involved with something, on Saturday at 8 o'clock at Pickering Creek, they're having an organized background bird count on the property there. And I understand Linda Youngbluff and others are going to have coffee. So that would be really nice. I'm probably going to be down with YMOS, the youth group, doing Dorchester County that day. So anyway, Great Backyard Bird Count. It's one of the citizen science organized birding things that go around all year. There's the backyard bird count. There's a May count. There's a fall bird count. There's the Christmas bird count, and sometimes some others that local organizations do. And all of those, as long as one's using eBird in particular, all of those go into the database that contributes to our understanding of how bird populations are varying, something we're going to look at again in a few minutes. So if you need more information on that or whatever, just email me and I'll be glad to take care of it. I won't be in much shape on Saturday. Okay. Anything else that's pressing here? I think so. Good. I'm not good with remembering some numbers, so I have a cheat sheet here. Let's start out. I don't have as many of these guys. My photographs of raptors are not as many. And I did have some smaller birds, but literally ran out of time to get them together. But we're going to go to the Cornell site a little bit later this afternoon, and we'll have a look at that. But I mentioned some of those guys. The upper left is what? Bald eagle. That's an adult. Again, it takes 5 years to get fully white head and tail. The juveniles are mottled. I sometimes say ratty. And that includes being mottled underneath. If they don't have the head and tail, by about the 4th year, you begin to see some white feathering in some individuals. But in any case, that leads to confusion with the golden eagle, which is usually darker. If we, God help us, if we saw a golden eagle in Blackwater, I have not seen any reported, so I don't think that's going to happen. But it will give you a chance to see some juveniles down there. The guy in the upper right is, and actually it's a gal. The female osprey has a little bit of a necklace around the base of the neck, and sometimes more pronounced, sometimes less. The males are usually white-breasted. We probably will not see osprey down at Blackwater. It's, given the weather this year, my guess is that they've been pushed pretty far south. But ospreys have been seen in Maryland in every month of the year. For the most part, they migrate down to the Caribbean from here. And ospreys that persist are probably ones coming in from further north. So we might see one, and I'm going to look up, show you in a minute how to differentiate them at a distance when you don't have to stand on top of the nest like that. How about the one in the lower left? One of our colorful little raptors. Look. Okay, that's a kestrel, an American kestrel. It's a falcon, and we'll look at what a falcon means in a few minutes, but it has these nice marks on the head, and that picture doesn't show it, and I didn't get the slide in time to show you, but if the bird were to turn its head, the males actually look like you're looking at the head of it's got 2 spots and another in the middle, in the back of the head. Looks sort of like you're looking at the face of a raptor. And it's thought that discourages birds from attacking it from above. The females don't have that as pronounced, but in the males they do. This one actually did, but I don't have the picture where its head is turned. It's a very colorful little thing, and the adults are nice and red on the back. The marks on the face are usually a giveaway. It's often common in the wintertime on wires. It has been declining in Maryland as a breeding bird, but in the wintertime we get some augmentation from the north, sometimes family groups in the early fall, and it wags its tail when it sits on a wire, pumps its tail up and down a lot. So that also helps tell it apart at a distance. The bird in the middle is not a raptor.
It's a not raptor.
Yeah, no hooky bill. All right, any guesses? I hope we'll see it at Blackwater. We get a few in the wintertime. Most of them leave. This is Forster's tern. Forsters. Forster's tern. We have several terns that pass through here. On the common tern actually has a colony on Poplar Island. Forster's tern, though, is our most abundant one in this region. It breeds on freshwater, upper Choptank, places like that. And in the wintertime, it has that black eye patch, and if you could see the back of the neck, there would be white there, which does not go around the back of the head. So we often see them when they're flying. There won't be but a couple of them, but they'll be very white looking because they don't have a lot of gray in the upper plumage. The wings kind of flash white, and that helps tell them apart from common terns that might be passing through. Common term around here is not common. All right, in the lower right.
Shoulder.
Tail. Okay, well, you're good with some of the sizes. And it is true. This is an immature, which is why all the streaking across the breast. This is an immature. It's a peregrine. Peregrine falcon. That picture was taken on the water tower in Ocean City a couple of years ago. I have not seen it back yet or seen the adult there. The adult would be much plainer breasted and slightly bluer. The big mark for the peregrine is one its size. It's about twice as big as a kestrel. And that big white, black patch coming down from the eye. Not two lines like in a kestrel, but the big white patch. So it's not a common bird, but it often gets seen by people just out casually birding around. It can be here in the wintertime. It has recovered from DDT to some degree. And so our population here is increasing, and there are places in Maryland where it does nest. I haven't seen them in a few years, but it used to nest on Chesapeake Bay Bridge. It used to nest in a building in Baltimore.
I have people that work there.
Oh, yes, it was. Carla went through several Red Butler husbands, as I recall, but I don't know if it's still nesting there or not. But the pigeon crop there is very good, and Kestrel can certainly handle that. So, and there are other places as well where they'll nest. They do like bridges, and there used to be a pair nesting in Cambridge on the Choptak River Bridge, on the old bridge. I have not seen them this year, but maybe the youngsters have such good eyes, maybe they'll pick them up. So anyway, if we do know where they are, we'll try to see if we can have a look at one, whether it's an adult or a juvenile. So here we go, the old splash screen again. This time we're on to Blackwater. So here we go. All right. But before we start, this is a study that came out 4 or 5 years ago in a European journal called EcoWatch. And it reports a study, this is actually a summary paper, but it reports a study that was done about happiness levels in birding. I figure you might as well enjoy it while you can. And what one of the summaries is that being around 14 additional bird species, these are Europeans, by the way, 14 additional bird species provided as much satisfaction as earning an additional $150 a month.
There you go.
How about that? Well, I went back and looked at our trip reports for eBird for the 2 field trips that we've had. And we've seen so far in our 2 trips, 53 birds. So if I divide that by 14, I get a multiplier of 3.79. You multiply that by $150, and I hope you're getting your money.
Charges.
Exactly. So any tips, just send money. That number will probably go up, and again, that's a monthly bit, so you do pretty well all year if you do a lot of birding. But our total number of species undoubtedly will increase maybe 50 to 70 by the time it's all over. So hopefully you're getting, it's worth your while and you're happy. Then you get this thing. This is a paper that I did mention in a previous talk. It gets cited a lot because it's the most comprehensive of these studies, where the authors combine eBird data, Christmas bird count data, that goes back to the year 1900, Christmas bird count data, great bird, backyard bird count data, spring and fall counts, all these resources, a lot of it citizen science done by folks like us, and some radar studies of birds crossing the Gulf of Mexico in particular. And it's a very complicated analysis. I am not in a position to be able to critique it, but integrating all that together, they came up with an idea that we've lost approximately a third of North American birds in the past 50 years. That is from 1970 to 2018 is the actual time frame they worked on. That works out to be about 3 billion birds, individual birds, not species, but individual birds. So if there is any sense, if you remember your youth, I'm slowly forgetting mine, but if you do remember those times when birds might have been dripping from the trees, if you started birding back then, and have a sense that there aren't as many warblers around anymore and so on, you're probably right. there are concentrations, local places where there's fallout of migrants and whatever, but, overall, we've lost about a third of our bird population in North America. And there have been some studies, not as comprehensive as this, done elsewhere in the world, and the trend seems to be pretty much the same. Maybe the magnitudes are different slightly.
The causes are probably complex, but what's the primary?
We're gonna look at that a little bit and look at some solutions. And then actually in the next two classes. So, yes, the causes are very complex. If I had to say one thing, about the cause, it would be habitat. If you want to cause a species to go extinct, change its habitat. You don't have to kill them off. Just, in fact, that's difficult to get the last one.
So is there any other points on the graph before 1970s? Rising to 1970s?
One could go back to the Christmas bird count and look at those kinds of changes. I'd like to do that for St. Michael's count. I just haven't had the inclination or time to go through that. But all those data are available through National Audubon. You can actually do that and look at, say, duck populations in the Chesapeake region, see that the 1980s and 70s were lots,
Yeah.
a lot more than there are now.
And if you overlay it, we've just had an extraordinary situation with weather.
Oh, yes.
That's gotta have taken an impact on the bird.
Oh, yeah. And that certainly did for a Christmas bird count, all our,
And it was only just beginning of that, right?
Now, the data on insect count is probably more severe than that too. So
Exactly.
And can they relate it? Because if you don't got the buggies,
There have been a number of studies, mainly in Europe. Yeah, but we are, facing an Armageddon as far as insect loss is concerned. And I don't just mean bees and pollinators. Now, it seems to be across the board. So food may be another, contributor in some cases, but generally habitat. If you want one cause, and there's lots of different habitats, so, it has to be kind of qualified. But, overall, that's probably what's going on. They summarized this graph, and I showed you this one. They've done this by what they call biomes, much as anything. And biomes are big chunks of real estate, if you will, that have similar habitats altogether. So there's prairies and grasslands and so on, wetlands, which includes ducks, but also herons and other types of things like that. And they've mapped that on the map of the United States. It turns out, though, that this is a little misleading in that grassland species like the eastern meadowlark and northern bobwhite, which occur over here, in their paper are classified as eastern forest birds. So the last edition that I've seen, the 2002 State of the Birds report, the NABCI, as they call it, if they organize this, they'll be doing a new one, I guess, in a couple of years. Shows this more by kinds of species and groups of species. And this graph shows the ducks and geese going nuts. But also dabbling ducks and water birds like herons are doing pretty well. Everybody else is declining somewhat. One of the ones I'll be harping on next time is the grassland birds, which does now include the bobwhite and the meadowlark and things like the field sparrow. 34% decline based on those data. The reason the geese and swans have taken off, according to this State of the Birds report, has to do with their adaptation to agricultural lands. In our case, the switching to a lot of corn production, where there's always some left over, the birds have been able to capitalize on that. Also, they seem to be adapting to urban conditions so that some of our resident geese that now stay here all summer would contribute to that recovery as well. It wasn't always that good. If you look down at the numbers back in the 70s and 80s, goose populations around here weren't that high to begin with. But anyway, they've really taken off in spades, and that's the birds' ability to adapt to, if you will, a changing habitat and do so quickly. But the ducks and the water birds is a little less obvious, and I want to get to that point by showing you this tipping point stuff is kind of an edited piece. I'm not going to go into those. It has to do with birds that have been declining and lost over 50% of their population. But what I do want to do is to try to get I posed this question in a previous class. Why? Why the water birds in particular, the ducks, the dabbling ducks, and some other water species as well. And in order to get to that, we need to remember virtually, except for maybe two species, black duck and mallard, virtually every duck that occurs in the Chesapeake region that we've seen, we've done well this winter, are not breeders. They breed somewhere else, and they visit here in the wintertime only. So it's important that we focus on them because they're common birds, and it's nice to get to know them, and they're big. But where do they breed? Well, most of them breed in the Canadian Shield up into Canada, all the way up into Alaska. And as global warming keeps going, places like Hudson Bay and all of this. But the big duck factory in the United States, in North America, is an area called the Prairie Pothole region. And that region is shown in red here, and I'll blow it up a little bit for you, so you can see sort of where it is. It's located in Iowa, in through the Dakotas, a little bit in Minnesota, tiny bit in Montana before you get to the mountains, and then into Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. It's a huge area. It's about 300,000 square miles of real estate. To give you some idea of comparison to Delmarva, the area of the Delmarva Peninsula is 5,400 square miles, a little bit bigger. What does that landscape look like? Ideally, it looks like this. It was created, these are fairly flat lands, they're not at sea level, but fairly flat lands. When the glaciers receded, they left chunks of ice behind that continued to melt. And since the glaciers were a mile or two high, these chunks of ice were not ice cubes, they were not trivial. And they basically cause indentations in the landscape wherever they occur. And that results in a pothole. These potholes do not go down to the groundwater. They fill annually, if all things are equal, they fill by rainfall and snow melt so that they're more watered in the late winter and early spring and into maybe summertime. Some years, though, if there's a serious drought, and that's happening in places in that area now, they may not fill at all. They may be dry the whole season. That's tough on the ducks. In a landscape like this picture showing here, there are about 180 potholes per square mile. They're not very big. The average size is the size of a lot around here, 3.5 acres, something like that. That's an average. Some are much bigger, some are considerably smaller. And this cycle of wet versus dry, during the wet years when the potholes are well watered, late winter into perhaps sometime in the summer, those wet years, there's a lot of grass and vegetation growth within the potholes themselves. When they dry out later in the summer and into the fall, that drying out causes the vegetation that had grown up to decay. And that decay then is protected when they, releases nutrients into the soils, the wet soils perhaps, of the pothole itself. When the pothole gets rewatered by melting snow, those nutrients are released and promotes a lot of plant growth again. That same approach is taken when we're managing restored wetlands like at Blackwater, where we're managing for ducks. They rewater that in the summertime to promote growth, and they dewater it later to promote decaying vegetation. And the whole idea is that makes it favorable for waterfowl for that type of management. Well, this happens naturally in the prairie pothole region, and the ducks are taking tremendous advantage of this sort of thing. There's a little bit more of a close-up view. You may be able to see some livestock if this shows up. Yeah, in this area here. Basically, that whole region, or much of it, is actually one of the largest contiguous grasslands in the world. as well as being a major area for these potholes. And that ecosystem was maintained by fire for the most part. Periodic fires would keep the prairies basically set back the ecological succession. We'll talk more about that again next class. Set the succession back like the fires we saw, or at least the remnants of thereof at Atkins Arboretum. And so that maintains it, those periodic fires maintain this in an early successional stage or a grassland stage, with the addition of the potholes in between. Of course, the potholes don't burn, and the grasses never get so tall that we have to deal with the equivalent of a forest fire, or at least if they're managed well. This region is considered to be the most important breeding habitat for waterfowl, not just in North America, in the world. In the world. In unmodified areas, they support up to 130 duck pairs, different species necessarily, but duck pairs per square mile. 130. A lot of the birds that breed there include the mallard, the pintail, the gadwall, teals, shovelers, and some of the smaller diving ducks like scaup and bufflehead and others. Not all of these birds have the range restricted to the pothole area, but that's where perhaps we think somewhere between 50 and 70% of the North American duck populations actually breed in that region. Depending on whether, if the year is really dry, the number is lower. If the year is really wet, the number is higher. But just to give you some really important insight into that, we see all these ducks around here and think they just go off and up somewhere to the north and breed, but no, they breed in really specific habitats. This is the range of a duck that's very famous in the Chesapeake Bay region. This is the breeding range. This is the prairie pothole. You can see how much overlap there is there. There are some that do breed up in here. That's certainly true. There's habitat for them. Some of them migrate to the west coast, so we never see them. A lot of these ducks come down here. And here's their migration path shown in yellow. So this particular bird, you'd recognize, I hope, by now, is the canvasback. Yeah, with the Roman nose. One of the more famous and originally tasty of the Chesapeake Bay waterfowl, for which this region was justifiably famous. But canvasbacks don't breed here. They breed half of their population at least up in that region called the prairie potholes.
There doesn't seem to be any human stuff over in those potholes.
Yeah,
Because, so they haven't filled them in with cement, put up.
we're working on it. Yeah, unfortunately, I have to answer that one. It's certainly been recognized for a long time how important this really is. There's a canvasback coming in for a landing, and he's leaving behind a ruddy duck. I can tell that by the color, the white face. This is probably a scaup of some sort, greater or lesser. I don't know which one. I'm not quite sure what that one is. But as you see, there's a species diversity here that goes on as well. And the use of those grasslands for grazing seems to have been compatible with the ducks breeding in the pothole watersheds itself. So for a long time, this was recognized as free-range grazing as far as we're concerned for cattle ranching. But that slowly is beginning to change. The importance of the potholes, though, are such that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has more refuges per square mile than in any other region of the U.S. Okay, over here we've got Bombay Hook and we've got Blackwater and some of the satellites around that. But out there, we're dealing with a total of about 915,000 acres of wildlife refuge and waterfowl production areas set aside by the federal government for no hunting and protection of those habitats.
Does Canada do the same?
That's a good question. I'm gonna defer the answer because I want to show you that. Yeah,
Have you
that's a
ever
very
visited?
good question.
That area,
Pardon?
have you visited that area?
I have not. I came close. I was in Minnesota and I almost went over there. One of the things that's happening in the pothole area is they're doing a lot of fracking. So when we were in Minnesota, you see the trains go by and sometimes they had no end. Which is incredible. Well, anyway, 915,000 acres, sounds like a lot. It's 0.5% of the total prairie potable area. Only 0.5%. So it's certainly, while there's plenty of refuges out there, it's certainly not covering much of the total area of the puddle. And that, by the way, is in the United States. So, okay. Originally used for pasture, but as time went on, these pothole soils are very rich. And just like in the center of the Delmarva Peninsula, where there used to be a cypress forest and it's all been ditched and drained for farming, so industrial agriculture in particular began to erode there. And the result is that I think it was estimated that in some areas up to 90% of the potholes in small regions were actually degraded, either drained out or otherwise even plowed up because they're not that big for agricultural purposes. Makes sense, I guess. It's not, doesn't make environmental good sense, but it does make sense economically to be able to do that. And that trend started out sometime in the 40s and 50s and began to accelerate thereafter. Well, there's good news. And the good news is that that trend of erosion of the prairie pothole region began to slow down and to change dramatically in the 1980s. You would think that that has something to do with regulation, but we don't regulate agriculture that way. At least we certainly didn't do it in the 80s. What happened is that organizations like Ducks Unlimited, which is still the largest and most successful environmental organization in the country, partnered up with other local conservation groups and Audubon, and were able to persuade the USDA, Department of Agriculture, to designate the entire United States prairie pothole region as a conservation priority area under the CRP. If you've heard those initials before, correct? CRP is the Conservation Reserve Plan. In Maryland, we have actually an enhanced plan, but it's still the same basic national plan. In the Conservation Reserve Plan, farmers are paid, sometimes cost shared or otherwise paid, to take land out of production for a variety of environmental purposes, particularly environmental purposes. But in order to do that, your farm had to be in a conservation priority area so you could at least apply and be eligible for funding. And so what Ducks Unlimited and others did was to convince Congress and therefore the USDA in the 1985 Farm Bill to designate the entire U.S. prairie pothole region as a CRP, conservation priority, a CRA, conservation priority area. And that made farms in that area eligible voluntarily to enter into a contract. Most of them lasted 10 years and then could be renewed, to enter into a contract to take X amount of acres out of production and to be compensated, sometimes in a cost share way, sometimes 100%, to be compensated fairly for the loss of profit.
How vulnerable is it to the whims of the current administration?
It's a national law. I mean, the Farm Bill is up for review now.
Farm Bill seems to.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly complex bill, and this is just a small piece of it. But it had huge consequences in our cases for doing this, and I'll try to show you why. This map shows, I have to look at the data myself. One dot is 1,000 CRP acres that were entered into the program. So each dot you see there is 1,000 acres where farmers, sometimes more than one, entered into the program on a 10-year contract with the USDA. If you added all those dots up, you would come out with about 4.7 million acres by 1993. 4.7 million acres of former cropland land was converted back into habitat in one form or another. If you do the math on that, it's really interesting. That works out for about 7% of the land in the U.S. prairie pothole region, 7%. Remember I talked about the wildlife refuges? that was 0.5%. So we've multiplied that tenfold or more by simply volunteering to have landowners enter into this cost share type of program. It's been estimated that duck nesting successes past 1985 increased by about 46% in these lands. And another estimate is an additional 10.5 million ducks were recruited in these lands 1992 to 1997. And the process is still continuing on. Ducks Unlimited just got a nice grant a couple of years ago for enhancing its prairie pothole initiatives through a variety of other programs available for cost share for farmers. And they originally got let's see if I have the number here. They originally were awarded $4.2 million for this. By working with other programs and cost sharing and leveraging that money, they wound up with about $10 million. Their estimate is that 127,000 additional acres were entered into the conservation in the prairie pothole region. All of that is strictly voluntary. There's no law that requires landowners to do this. And a quote that I got when I read the announcement about that Ducks Unlimited grant was that we wanted to find solutions that worked for landowners that could improve soil health on farms and ranches, improve water quality and retention, and provide habitat for wildlife in the prairie pothole region. That's conservation that really makes sense. And to see, sort of getting back to Mary's question about Canada. Canada does not, I don't know what it does now, but it did not at that time have a law like that, any kind of cost sharing. So if you look at the data here, Canada is the upper line here. They were doing pretty well back in in the 50s and 60s. And we were doing rather poorly as we were eroding our prairie potholes. But again, the key years, 85, when the new Farm Bill became good. And Canada by then had been dropping and continues to drop in terms of duck recruitment. And the United States has continued to increase. There was a drought year, series of drought years, probably an El Nino year for all I know, in this area here. But on the whole, the trend has been upward. So there is a difference. And in a sense, this shows the difference of investing in environmental types of programs. I don't want to say regulations, in the environmental type of programs where we can work with the landowners. They own a hell of a lot more land than the federal government does when it comes to wildlife refuge. So they're, in a real sense, an untapped resource. And when brought into the programs well and given good advice and having alternatives, the result can be quite telling. And it's why in the study from 1970 to 2018, the wetland birds and the ducks increased, whereas just about everything else except for geese and swans plummeted. So there probably is a lesson there. And I hope we continue to learn that lesson. I don't know what the current administration is going to do about some of this, but I do know that we have been on the verge of actually doing something really good. And this is a good example of where we could be with our environmental laws without necessarily having to impose regulations and mandates. So it's a tale worth telling. And for sportsmen and others who in fact, benefit as well as us birders for the results. It shows what collaboration in community can really do if it wants to. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, I'm going to be segueing into the birds that we might see or hope to see. Now I got to find the sheet again. Heading down Blackwater Way. And I want to start by, this is from an old book by Roger Tory Peterson. that he wrote for beginning birders. And I actually have had a copy when I was a kid, and I looked up what's in there, and my earliest birding date is 1958. And this was the book I used. Yeah, this is a little paperback. I was telling this story to some colleagues at the Maryland Ornithological Society some time ago. I think it was probably one of their conventions. I told them that story. And one of the friends actually sent me a copy. It's the second edition, so it has some color plates in it and everything else, but that's the copy I now have. And so I went to it and I knew what some of the content was. Peterson was very good. He was an early jizz man when it comes to this sort of thing. Even though his books stressed field marks, his early books had a lot of silhouettes. If you go to the inside covers on some of his earlier field guides to the birds editions, you'll see silhouettes of birds on the roadside, and you'll see silhouettes of birds in the air, and silhouettes of birds in a field. And basically, it's identifying the birds just by their appearance and behavior, and not necessarily by just looking at those field marks that became his hallmark in his books. And so this is actually from what was called How to Know the Birds. It's about a 120-page little paperback. And one of his plates there, sketches, he did all these himself, shows 3 species of raptor, large raptors in the air. And I still use this in teachable moments when we get out and see what's going on. I talked about this a little bit at Atkins Arboretum, but we didn't have an eagle to compare it with. But the turkey vulture holds its wings in a dihedral that is slightly above the horizontal. It also has this tilting type of flight as it takes advantage of every air current it possibly can. Peterson correctly shows the bald eagle having straight out wings. This is when they're soaring or not flapping very much. And it holds its wings straight out, not in a dihedral. And an osprey, when you see that in the air, yeah, it looks lighter, but at a distance, it can still look dark.
This is what its plate looks like now.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. It's still kind of there. And it's got a kink in the wings. So you can tell these 3 birds without binoculars, if your eyes are decent, at any distance. And with binoculars, certainly at most distances where you can focus, just by what they look like and how they fly. And so right away, you say, God, I saw a bald eagle. And the juvenile bald eagle does the same thing, wings straight up. Okay. So that's one of the early approaches. This is another one from his book where he's introducing raptors and talking about hawks and so on. And he shows the silhouettes of the 3 basic kinds of hawks. There are a couple of others in here. It's kind of like diving ducks. There are some exceptions, but on the whole, a falcon has short, pointy wings, longish tail. That's true whether it's a kestrel or a peregrine. They're both falcons. We now know that falcons are not related to some of the other raptors very closely. They're more closely related to parrots. And so in more modern field guides that do taxonomic order, you won't find the falcon with the other raptor. In other books that put them together by similarities, you'll find them there. But if you have an earlier edition, it's only a few years now to start to do this. If you have an earlier edition, you may see them all together, all the raptors in one place. The intermediate one is also an interesting exception because something really just changed within the last year. They used to be called accipiters. And accipiters, as Peterson said, a lot of people call them bird hawks. Some folks call them chicken hawks and so on. They have more rounded wings, a nice long tail, capable of dodging tree limbs and so on, actually pursuing small birds into foliage, into trees. So they really can do this sort of thing. The short wings helps. They often flap them fairly rapidly. But we now know that our 2 accipiters, the 2 common ones, the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned hawk, are not that closely related. In fact, the only true accipiter in North America turns out to be the sharpie, the sharp-shinned hawk. And it's related to a bird called the sparrowhawk, not to confuse it with the U.S. name, over in Europe. And so eBird and Cornell and all this now don't call them accipiters. They talk about these hawks as being accipiterine. For what it's worth. And they're using the Cooper's Sharpie, and we'll look at the pictures of them in a minute. Cooper's and Sharpies is an example of convergent evolution. Right before your eyes. Those differences have been based on DNA studies. And then the bigger hawks, are called the Buteos, B-U-T-E-O-S, and they have broader wings, shorter, but usually broader tail if they fan it. And this would be like your red-tailed hawk. And so these hawks themselves tend to soar a lot more. They like to feed on rodents, try to catch them by surprise by pouncing on them, flying over a meadow, seeing them, and then going down. Falcons typically can eat everything from grasshoppers, as the kestrel does, to peregrines, which can do a duck. It has remained duck hawk by some old hunters. But anyway, those three shapes hold pretty well, so that if you can see a hawk in flight, after you learn a little bit about the shape and perhaps how fast the wings are flapping, you can get it down to at least, is it a falcon, is it an accipiter, or accipitrine, or is it a buteo? And then you can narrow that down to one or two species. So that's what Peterson's field guide did. And now we'll actually go and look at some examples from, set down, and up from Cornell. So let's search for bald eagle. Okay. Take a peek inside. Yeah, look at it from the bottom of a woodpecker hole. Well, there's Mr. National, but what I really want to show you is this in the photo gallery. See what I mean about the straight out wings? Just the very tips are tipped up, but the wing as a whole is not held in a dihedral. And when I talk about ratty underneath, this is the juvenile. No, very little, if any, white in the tail. Modeling, especially along the wing linings here, no white in the head. This is a juvenile bald eagle. As they age, you can begin to see sometimes a little bit more white in the tail, but again, they're always modeled underneath. A golden eagle is basically solid brown all underneath here. It also holds its wings a little differently, but since we're not likely to see it, don't worry about that right now. But if you have friends that say, I saw a golden eagle the other day, and if they're observant, ask them whether they saw on the underside. This is probably a bald. Okay? And
Wayne, can I ask something? Can you hear me?
yes.
So as the juvenile bald eagle matures, its beak also changes color?
Yeah, from the darker kind of horny color that you see here to a lighter color in the mature adult. That's exactly right. Other birds do that too. If you observe goldfishes at your feeder, as the males start to turn yellow, the bills start to get orangey. Color.
Wait, when their flight pattern for an eagle, I always imagine it seems very muscular. It seems like they take off and they're, compared to, just watching one of them start behind them when you can't see the whole bird. Even their pattern looks like, not like a vulture. They look
Right. They look
really.
The question had to do with an observation that when eagles are taking flight, they often have very muscular wing beats. But look at a vulture when it does that too. If a vulture is leaving its roost, it really labors.
Yeah.
It really labors till it can gain speed and height or pick up a thermal. It also has very, very muscular type wing beats, or at least laboring. The wings are longer and thinner. So it shows up that way, whereas an eagle has this big fat wing. It really makes it more. But that's absolutely true. Yeah. Vultures, of course, tend to glide a lot more than eagles do. Bald eagles will glide, sometimes during migration, they'll glide very high, hardly move their wings at all. But usually when we see them a little bit lower down, they're flapping quite a lot more often than a vulture would do. Okay. So you can tell the three apart. If we see, if we're so fortunate as to see a osprey in the air down there during this or even on the next field trip. They could be anywhere. They typically, the day I always remember them showing up in Maryland is St. Patrick's Day, but actually they show up around the 1st of March and sometimes even earlier than that, if it's mild. But right now with this weather, who knows? We should see lots of eagles at Blackwater. A lot of practice with those. Okay, let's see what else I've got here. Okay, let's do some buteos here. Okay. And here's a red tail, and this is an adult. You probably won't see many like that. But you might see one like this. All right. Red-tailed hawks, if you get really confusing, if you go to a book that starts to look at raptors in some detail, you'll find there are light versions, there are dark versions. This is true for a lot of other raptors as well. This is the typical light version, but more likely what you would see here as an adult. It is, as an adult, the tail is red, and that helps, but it's red on the top. So unless you get the sun shining down on it, you can see through it. You may not see the red. But as an adult, it's the only buteo having these broad wings and broad tail, shorter broad tail. It's the only buteo that has an unbent tail that we're likely to see in this part of it. So the tail show no bands of black and white or dark and light in an adult. The adult typically has this belly band here, which is kind of broken streaks. And again, it varies, but with not between individuals and between various morphs of the red tail. But in general, it looks like that. Here's a darker version here. And here you can see the red on top of the tail. So this is a fairly common bird along the roadside. It winters here as well as breeds here. It's our common breeding hawk in the, at least our breeding buteo in this region. It likes open fields as much as anything. And it has a, see if this, I have to remember how to get through here. Yeah, with similar species, there's the red tail, and there's a similar buteo called the red-shouldered. Right. Red-shouldered hawk is more of a forest hawk. We get a few breeding here, and they're very loud. The red-tailed hawk, you know, when you see the ads for various for insurance, and they have the hawk and it goes, and they have a bald eagle going, right? That's a red-tailed hawk. It's not a bald eagle. Well, we should hear him down at Blackwater, but it's much different. But yeah, all right, like that. And blue jays imitate it rather well, so that for a novice, they may actually mistake blue jays for red-tailed hawks. Merlin might have that problem. Red-shouldered hawk. What I say about an adult with a banded tail. All right, underneath here it has some various streakings that actually make the breast red, and the shoulders are red, but that's not necessarily a very good feel for it. But the typical buteo shape, broader wings, shorter, broader tail, and if you see stripes on the tail, it's most likely a red shoulder. Down here in the wintertime, it's as common a roadside hawk as the red tail, if not a little bit more. And once it finds good roadkill, it may stay in that site for several days, if not longer, looking for the next. So that we could see it on telephone wires or trees as we drive down to Blackwater. And again, blue jays are real good at imitating its call, but it's a much more yeah. And in the breeding season, we'll do it incessantly, flying just above the trees. So that if you hear a really noisy bird calling all the time, it's probably a red-shouldered hawk if it's not a blue jay.
Is it called winter plumage? It's white.
No, they're the same. Yeah. And basically the sexes are the same. Usually in raptors, the females are slightly larger. And juveniles even larger than that because the adults feed them too much.
So the main thing to tell me
juvenile buteo hawks are pretty big.
is the white breast on the.
Right, here you see the white breast with just this little band.
Yeah.
This breast is more uniform and it's usually reddish, in any kind of light that you can see with that. This time of year, they're probably about equally calm. So if you see a large hawk sitting by the road, you might have to give it a second look to tell which one is. Okay,
Wayne,
yes,
I've mentioned before that we have a pair that nest behind our house. But they're not there in the winter. Do they go a little ways south?
right.
Okay.
They got
They
to,
come back earlier than a lot of.
yeah, a lot of our local birds here will drift south till they find reasonable amounts of food. So that does happen with the hawks, or they just may go to a different habitat that's more productive for them.
Yeah,
And then go back to nesting.
like next week it's gonna be in the 50s.
Mhm.
I won't be surprised if they'll come back and kind of check out the nest and hang out a couple of days
Yeah.
and then they leave again.
There you go.
It's weird, but.
Well, yeah, but you know, they keep an eye on that. We're going to see nesting eagles down at Blackwater, so
Yeah.
we'll,
Okay.
but yeah, they might have moved south or they might have just moved to another location with that's better food for them
Okay,
at that time.
thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Those are our two major buteos. There are others. If you really want to do hawks, go to a hawk watch station. There's one at Turkey Point up in the mouth of the bay, the head of the bay. It's pretty productive in the fall. And be amazed at how well some of the hawk watchers can identify species that look just like specks on the horizon. Okay. Alrighty, let's do some accipitrine. I'm gonna have to learn how to say that. The common one this winter is this one. This is the Cooper's hawk. Again, this is an adult, which is kind of rusty underneath and bluish on the back. Here it is, full thing is perched. You can see these bands here. So it gives it a little bit of a robiny breast. It doesn't have patches going down over the eye. It has kind of a dark cap. This is actually a blue-gray. Here we are looking at it from the back. It's still an adult and smaller bill. These are bird hawks. They do prefer to eat small birds and are adapted to it because their wings are a little bit shorter and their tail is a little bit longer, so they're more maneuverable. Here's a juvenile. I'm not too good with juvenile hawks, but here's a juvenile showing that instead of having those red bands, it has these vertical streaks on the breast. It will actually look, some of them look quite large. In the air, there's a Cooper's hawk. It has these shorter wings, not as broad. This is actually a smaller bird than the red tail. But the big difference between this and the sharp shin, for most beginning birders, is the tip of the tail, which is rounded when it's closed. When it's open, it's hard to tell what it is. But when it's closed, which is often, it is rounded. Often so there's a fair amount of white on the tip as well. But that's the best thing. Cooper's is a bigger hawk than the sharp shinned, and the crop area here is often enlarged, so it has a bigger neck. But when in doubt, you may have to just say, I saw an accipitrine hawk.
Yeah, I'm looking at the photos here and I'm going,
Yeah,
unless you can tell the rounded versus flat tail.
that's the best. That's the best. There's more to the gist. Wing beats are slower because it's a bigger bird, and that helps a lot. The Sharpie flaps more, but this is the most reliable right here. And even then, you can't get it all. But let's look at a Sharpie. And remember, this is not an accipiter anymore, but that's what it is in most books. This is its own group. Yeah, and that all came out just a year, maybe 2 years ago, from the result of DNA studies. Looks a lot like a coop. And, but again, it's turned out that this is convergent evolution. Both of these birds pursue other birds and the Sharpie smaller birds, but it has the same adaptation in terms of shorter, more rounded wings but the tip of the tail, if you know it.
And it has a yellow spot.
I wouldn't rely on that. I wouldn't rely on that. All the accipiter type, accipiter green hawks have these, fairly white fluffy feathers around the vent. But, that's not useful either. Here we go. This one's in the air, but it's got its tail spread. Let's try this one. There you go. Square.
Yeah.
Okay, square across top. This is a juvenile one.
Is one more common?
In the wintertime, Cooper's is the most common. And it's likely, if it likes your bird feeders, it's likely to be frequenting them now. It's a little bit bigger bird.
Theater?
Oh, yeah, they'll come to a feeder all right.
Yeah.
For the birds.
Oh, no.
Yeah, yeah, bird feeder is a bird feeder. So, but the square tail, you can see the square tail, it has to be folded, which often is. The square tail will help you identify what this is.
But
This guy flaps.
if the summer is,
In the summer, actually, Cooper's does breed in Maryland. So it's a year-round bird. It's a little bit more visible in the winter just because it's not hiding in a tree so much. Sharpies tend to migrate through. So they typically winter a bit south of here, but we do get them in the Christmas bird count and maybe this time of year, it's not like it is now. And then they migrate through, so you see them in the spring and the fall, and they breed north of here. They don't breed in Maryland.
And the size difference between the two, because we had the hawk come to our bird feeder and eat
No.
birds. But I think it was sharp, but I thought it was a pretty small hawk.
Yeah.
Wasn't a very big bird.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
size, yeah. Size helps, especially if they're flying, because the Sharpie has to flap harder and faster, so that if you get used to them, you can see that. You have to be a little careful with size because, again, the females are larger. So a female Sharpie could approach a male Cooper's in size.
What's the largest? What's the largest?
The largest hawk around here,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say around here, 'cause I don't know the western ones that well, would be red tail, I think is the largest, and it's a medium.
Goshawk.
That's the largest exhibiting terrain hawk, but it's not an exhibit. The only true exhibit is sharp as this bird. Yeah. That'll become probably more widely known as time goes on, but lots of people have field guides that are 2 or 3 years old and they're going to call them both exhibitors. And in a sense, that's really helpful, but it turns out to not be totally correct. Anyway, this is the only true exhibitor in North America and is related to the European sparrowhawk, among others, in the old world. So, and again, this is a juvenile, but you can tell that one is exhibitor with the rounded wings and two the square long tail that narrows it down pretty much to being a juvenile sharpshooter hawk. Hawks take time to get to know. It's not like ducks where you can look at them and they sit on the water and you can, when they go to Oakley Street. And, but hawks, you often have to see at a distance. Sometimes a spotting scope is useful, but they're often kind of antsy about getting, you're getting too close. So that you'll often see them flying by or sitting in a distant tree. And many times, probably only 30% of the time can I really necessarily identify a hawk at a distance. But if you go to a hawk watch, you'd be amazed.
But we did see it. Remember, we saw that hawk going through the red-winged blackbirds?
Yeah.
It was a juvenile, and there was a huge flock of red-winged blackbirds. And this little hawk was trying to catch it in the air. It was going underneath it, up to when the birds would fly around, come back into formation. It stood there for 20 minutes, like fools.
It's
Totally entertained.
yeah, really something. The falcons do it.
No, he didn't.
They
He
don't always do it. Falcons get them by surprise. The peregrine, of course, is, well, let's do falcons. The peregrine, of course, famous for that. But let's do the kestrel we're most likely to see. And that's American kestrel. Yeah, that's the duration. That must know. Private
Big difference, female and male.
Oh, yeah, here we go. So there's the American kestrel, a beautiful little thing. This bird is about the size of a blue jay, very small crow. This is undoubtedly a male, and it has the two marks by the eye, and you can begin to see the hit. There's a patch of black here at the base of the nape, and then this mark here, and similar mark on the other side, makes it look from above like the head of a hawk, big hawk. And that's supposed to be a deterrent for predation from above. Kestrels are small enough that they don't usually eat birds, although it gets the name sparrowhawk. That's brought over, one from Europe, and two, totally unrelated bird, by the way, and two, just relative size. It's not so much that it eats sparrows, it prefers grasshoppers.
They do have a hooked beak, right?
They have a hooked beak. That's right. And so the parrots, by the way, which they're more closely related to. Sparrowhawk is a falcon. That's a video. Let's see anything in light here. Let's see. Well, that'll do. Yeah. Okay. As a falcon, the wings are pointed, a little bit shorter. They're not as rounded as they are. If you look at a field guide, you can see the difference a little bit better. We can compare them. This bird has a reddish tail, some spots on the bottom. And so that's the American kestrel. And I don't think they have a picture of it from the back.
Male.
That's head's turned there. I'll have to show you that slide that I have, where I was able to capture one from the rear. Okay, anyway, that is our American kestrel. It's a bird that's more visible in the winter because it likes roadkills or grasshoppers or whatever, the small mice at that time of year. In the wintertime, it'll be perched on wires. In the fall, sometimes you'll see what I call family groups of 5 or 6. It's declining seriously in Maryland. It does not breed much in the state anymore. It's declining all over, but in the state of Maryland in particular, as a summer resident, it's relatively uncommon. But it's not uncommon to see 6 or 7 strung out on wires in October or November in lots of places. So, and there'll be young ones in there, which are
Waiting
not as
for roadkill or
pardon.
waiting for roadkill?
Yeah, yeah. So, that's our common falcon. Again, we showed, the sky. And while it's not a common bird, picking it the same way it used to. Yeah. This is the peregrine. This is a very muscular bird. This particular version here, it does have this black splash down by the eye, but it also has more black on the face. Once again, there are various morphs of these guys. It's a falcon, it has falcon pointed wings, but very powerful wing beats because it's the size of a pigeon or bigger. And quite frankly, at some distance, it looks like a pigeon. When you finally see the head pattern, then you can see that you're looking at maybe your first pair.
Would it take a pigeon? Would
It
it
could take a pigeon, definitely, absolutely.
That's good.
Merlin is the one that's called the pigeon hawk, but that's again just a misnomer. So look, it could appear anywhere, but often if you see a lone hawk sitting in a tree, it's worth a second look. Because it may turn out to be a Merlin or a peregrine. So if we see anything like that going down Egypt Road or any place else down Blackwater, we'll see if we can turn into this. They're fairly common coastal. I used to surf fish more regularly in Ocean City. I'd see them go by several times, several birds a day as they go along the coast there, looking. There they could prey on small gulls. Peregrine falcon. This bird all but disappeared in the east as a result of DDT. And it took concerted one regulation, in this case, to cut DDT out of our arsenal of pesticides as best we could. And also by active falconers actually hacking these birds, raising them in captivity, and then releasing them in the wild, and that helped restore the population quite a bit. So a good success story there, again, done often by volunteers. Okay, those are the raptors. We're going to be looking, if we can get a buteo, a falcon, and a exhibitorine hawk on that trip, that would be really game. Be really cool. And it's not impossible. These are not that uncommon in the winter, but you just have to be out there and have a look.
Right time, right place.
You got it. Well, let's look at a couple of ducks that we haven't seen yet. These should be fairly common down at Blackwater. This is the green-winged teal, T-E-A-L. Teal are small dabbling ducks. And by small, I mean almost pigeon size, or just a tad big. So that when you see them flying with a mixed flock with, say, mallards or some other larger duck, they really do look little. And the wing beats are much, much faster. You can just tell it by size alone. They're substantially little. The commonest one in winter around here is the green wing. And like many ducks, it has this swatch of green back from the eye, like the widgeon does, and several others. The quickest way to tell it, if you can see it and get decent light, is this vertical mark in front of the wings coming up from the water. It's not a broad triangle like it is in the ringneck duck. It's just a vertical line. And the butt is tannish. Being a dabbler, it has to tip up and therefore frequents very shallow water. It is often found on very small ponds, unlike even mallards sometimes are found in ponds of small sizes. Sometimes in big groups, and it has a high-pitched squeaking kind of call, so that when you hear a lot of them together, you'll be able to tell that you're looking at green-winged teal, and the females have a very high-pitched quack that usually intersperses with the rest. They should be feeding in the grasses down at Blackwater. So, and we should see lots of them. Assuming there's open water. Green-winged teal. There are other types of teal as well, but this would be the most common. So if we see a small duck going up in a flock of others, it's almost certainly going to be this. Okay. We have a diving duck. That might, if the chop tank is thawed enough, we might see this guy further offshore. It'll probably take a scope to see it. I have seen it near the bridge from where we're going to be parking here at Sailwinds. I saw one at Ocean City, but it was on my scouting day, and I did not take it to go after it. It's a kind of a block-headed duck. The drake has this nice big white patch at the base of the bill in front of the eye. And the head sheen is greenish. The overall impression is a very white bodied bird when it's on the water. So
Isn't the female brown?
the female is brown. That's correct. Again, I often do the hens by the company they keep. This is a video of a male in water. You can see what I mean by having a very white body. And that patch of white shows up very, very well. And the head shape is actually pretty distinct. And guess what? It's a diving duck. Did you enjoy using All About Birds? Oh, yeah, I sure did. There's the female. Okay, not as white on the side, very big brown head, fairly distinctive looking. After you get used to knowing what it is, wouldn't have a lot of trouble with it. They probably outnumber the drakes like 2-1. Something like that. But it tends not to come into Oakley and feed on the corn there. It's a diving duck. It can dive down and get mollusks and stuff off the bottom. So it tends to be much further offshore in the chop tank and, of course, in the Chesapeake Bay as well. Common golden eye. It's been harder to see the last several winters. We had a few this year on the Christmas bird kit.
They look small.
Yeah, they're mallard size, but more compact.
Oh.
Yeah. Here's a big duck. And we might, very well, we bottomed out on scoters, didn't we? We got all three.
Yeah.
All right, well, we've got hooded and red-breasted. This is the common merganser. This bird is about loon size. It's a big, great big duck. Green head, no necklace, merganser-shaped bill, which is fairly red, easy to say. It looks like a big white bird with a black head on the water. And another view again. Kind of looks elongated like a loon too. Doesn't fly like a loon, it flies more like a duck. Loons tend to have their heads a little below the horizontal, whereas mergansers and other ducks, it's up even with the horizontal or even slightly up from that. It likes fresh water or fairly unsaline bay water, brackish water, yeah. So that down at Blackwater, it's usually found off on the Blackwater River. You can see it from the observation post. It will take a scope to really pick it out well, but they're sometimes down there by the scores. We might see some flying over as well. As the spring progresses, they begin to appear in the upper tributaries. So you could even see one in the creek. But it may not be able to fly out of there. It'll have to swim down to a wider area of water to be able to take off. But they do appear in places like the Chester River, Chop Tank, and further up during spring migration as they move further north. Common merganser, and again, that would be our trifecta if we have good luck with it. And Blackwater's probably in the winter at least the most reliable place to find them. We saw them there the first of the year and late last year, so my guess is we'll have a good shot at it now if it's not iced over. Okay. Let's do the turn. Those are the three ducks: the teal, the golden-eye, the merganser. That would be new to us, and we'll pretty well have the ducks covered for a change. By the way, that harlequin is still there. Yeah, confirming you guys that we're able to see it. I saw it before, but didn't see it then. This guy that we're looking for now is the turn. I guess we'll better go this way. Forster's tern. Here's an adult and here's the juvenile. So again, this patch of the eye is kept in the young birds, but adult birds in the winter also do not show the black cap. Terns are these fairly bigger than swallows, but swallow-like flight. They're smaller than gulls. They're a lot more dainty. And we have several species that go through this area in migration. But for purposes of this course to do common winter birds, Forster's would be the only one, I wouldn't say common, to be the most likely one to see down at Blackwater, and they get seen there every month or so.
It's interesting, looking at Peterson's book, the one doing the feeding is spring, summer, adult, and then it has the adult, fall, winter foliage for the chick.
Yeah. But here's a non-breeding adult. Winter adult. Okay, so it has this patch. Unlike the common tern, which is grayer above, these guys are fairly silvery out on the wingtips, and that sometimes flashes very nicely, which helps also with their identification. But as I say, common tern is not common, although there is a colony on Poplar Island, and they do get seen around here. Nevertheless, Forsters are our common tern, fresh and brackish water, and can be there all year. It becomes quite common later in the spring and through the summer, breeding in freshwater marshes. So there's some other differences that have to do with the bill color, and those are in the textbooks. I'm going largely, for me, the gist is the fact that it's a winter tern and not a gull. And it should look silver. That's enough for me. I don't need to look at bill colors and other such things. Okay. So that's our turn for the winter time. And with a little bit of luck, we won't leave a turn on the stone. Okay. There's a specialty bird down there. We didn't see them on the coast, but most everybody who's been over in Ocean City sometime, much of the year, has seen the brown pelican, which now breeds in Maryland. There is a flock of sometimes over 100 of these huge pelicans down at Blackwater. I have asked and asked again. They first started to show up there about 15 years ago, just one or two, and then there were more, and there were more. Some years you get 20 or 30, then suddenly you start to hear accounts of 70 and 80. Now it's sometimes over 100. They bunch together, so they may not be where we will be, but we'll try. If this bird is the size of a great blue heron, and in some ways even bulkier, huge bill. It's a pelican, so it has the gular pouch. But these big black wing, not just the wing tips, but the whole secondary wing plumage here on the wings is black and very laborious flight. In breeding season, they have this little protrusion on the upper bill, much bigger than this one in most cases. If we see one, here's a breeding adult.
What's the purpose of that?
Probably sex.
She likes it.
Yeah, she likes it. I've not seen a breeding adult, this decked out. This is probably from Yellowstone Park or somewhere. But I have seen them with this big protrusion here. The females don't have that. And the black in the wings doesn't always show when the bird is on the water. But there's not much else you're going to mistake it for, especially if there's a bunch of.
Yeah.
So that everybody who goes to Blackwater, used to be you go to Blackwater to see bald eagles, right? Nowadays you go down and see the pelicans. So hopefully they will be there. They didn't get frozen out. When they're in the air in the spring, before they migrate to wherever they're going to go, it reminds me of the tropics, Florida. It's just spectacular.
We were there before the freeze, I think.
I noticed that.
Yeah, and the person who was there before us with the rope counted 128.
Okay. There you go. Okay. Time runs down. Let's see if we can pick up a couple more that are likely at Blackwater.
He's great. Yeah.
Not cowbird. Brown-headed nuthatch, cute little guy, smaller than our common white-breasted nuthatch, which seems to have taken a dive since the cold weather. I've got a couple at my feeders, but a lot of people are remarking they're not seeing very many. We did a climate watch run a week ago in early February, and we didn't get any white-breasted nuthatches, which is for us is unusual. The brown-headed likes the loblolly pines. And it particularly likes the ends of the branches, whereas other nuthatches are often found running up and down the tree bole or on the base of the limbs. These guys are often found out in the cones and out in the foliage itself. They have a sound that sounds a great deal like a rubber ducky. And when you hear a bunch of them going off, you know that they do come in fairly nicely to a pink owl. Chicken is full of algae, so hopefully we'll get some down there. But that's one of the areas that breeds. It's a southern species. The furthest north I know of really is up around Eastern Neck Island, north of Penn Island, and also over at Cape Pendleton. There's a colony there. Brown-headed nuthatch, and it can do like other nuthatches, run up and down without using its tail, run up and down the tree trunks and so on. Much more likely to sort itself out in the at the ends of the branches. And these are the birds I saw today at my driveway. These are larks. They are true larks. In the males, the face is fairly yellow. It has this nice black mark. It also has a black breastband. The horns are hard to see. In some birds up close, you may actually see these little tufts of feathers up here. But it's a common bird of open country. Peterson's guides, he often lumped them as birds of open country and included snow buntings in there, horned larks, American pipits, and a number of other birds that are found largely in old fields, plowed fields that are bare, often with exposed ground if there's snow, or along roadsides. It is actually quite common, and we should, if I can see them on my driveway, we certainly should see them along Egypt Road somewhere. hopefully close enough to not have to get out the scopes on it. And, okay, that's the horned lark. The female is a little duller overall, but she's just as smart. The other open country bird that everybody goes after, but they form fairly large flocks, and it's hit or miss. It's kind of like snow geese. You either see them or you don't. This is the American pipit. We were at Oakley Street last year when we were doing the warbird things, and there was one sitting on a seawall. So, pretty crazy. It looks like a sparrow. That doesn't have the conical bill. It's not quite as thick as that. It walks like a chicken and bobs its tail also. So it's kind of wiggles all over the place. Has these streakings in the back, and they're usually found not in singletons, but often in flocks of scores. When they fly, they undulate like a goldfish. And they move around the fields quite a bit. So the flock will settle down just when you find out where they are, because they're hard to see against the grass. Once you find out where they are, they fly off again. But this is the American pipit. It used to be called the water pipit. Again, it breeds further north tundra-wise, but is a common winter visitor in open fields in this part of the country. And anytime anybody goes out in the country, they usually look for these things. Our final bird of the morning or afternoon is this guy. Best I can do. Eastern meadowlark, robin-sized bird, but shorter and more compact. Kind of a fat. It is actually a blackbird, as is by the way of Baltimore Oriole. Bright yellow, this time of year more faded, but a big, nice V on the breast. And they in the wintertime they tend to flock together, so we usually can see more than just one. And again, it's likely to be seen along the road. And to me, it's the sound of farmland. And, you know, bobwhites are gone now. I mean, thank goodness we still have some meadowlarks, although they're declining as well. Most reliable place to see them beyond, say, Egypt Road is usually pretty good, is Oxford Conservation Park. And they do pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, they're managing that for birds like this, for grassland birds. And we're going to talk about grassland birds because that's another declining group in this case that maybe we can do something about. And we'll look at some examples, especially what Jay Falstad is doing on his property as well, and talk a little bit about how that fits into the concept of succession and land use in the past here in the Chesapeake. Okay.
We see the western meadowlark.
I heard one once when we moved into our house. That was 40 years ago. I actually heard the song. It could have been a stray. I thought it can't be because western meadowlark is really west of the Great Plains.
Yeah.
But it definitely was a song different than this. It's more melodious, and I never saw the bird. I was busy moving, but basically it is possible, but not very likely. And they look a lot alike. So that's pretty careful. Yeah, and they might even hybridize. So, but the song is different. So if you hear a western one, you might know you're saying it's another record that ain't right, and go from there. Okay. Any questions? We'll wrap up here. Okay, good deal. Well, hopefully we'll pick up some of those on the way, and have a nice. It looks like it's going to be a nice day.
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
That's perfect.
But great backyard.
I have a question. I'm sorry I was late, so you might have already covered this. Is our field trip on Friday extended?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I'm going to try to get out a lot sooner than we did on the coast.
Okay.
But we'll have lunch at the visitor center is the plan right now. Although we'll count on how good the birds are. I'm not going to try to drag them.
Okay,
And that'll make the final field trip in a week shorter.
all
Okay.
right.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you all then.
Thanks, Wayne.